Hi there, I am kara-mcnabb, and today we are going to talk herbal medicine and the many forms that it can come in. So this is a question I get asked often by clients. What form do I take this herb in? Should I get a capsule? Should I do tincture? Why? When? So we're gonna talk a little bit about that. Before I get into that though, just a reminder that all of these lessons and classes and guided meditations and everything that you are listening to in this series is offered to everybody. It's freely accessible, and I am asking for donations if you can. If there's a particular episode that you really love or really get a lot out of, or maybe you don't love it at all, you just are feeling in the mood of being supportive, please donate. Anything from $1 to $20 to more is extremely helpful to so many of us in this time. The details for how to do that are in the details attached to wherever you're seeing this video. You can PayPal to me directly. kara-mcnabb@gmail.com is my contact info there. Please donate it as a gift. And Venmo, kara-mcnabb is my contact information there. Okay, on to herbalism. So herbalism can be used or consumed in several different forms. So tea is a pretty widely known one. Tincture, oxymel, capsules or supplements, poultice, glycerite, food. So I'm going to talk through some of those. So a tea is technically not a tea, because a tea is a certain type of plant or a certain type of leaf. And we generally aren't, maybe in some cases, using tea leaves for herbal medicine. So maybe we'll call them an herbal infusion to be more correct. I'll probably say tea because that's generally the term that I use. So just want to let you know, discern between those. So you can do a steep in boiling water with the dried herbs that you have on hand. Of course, many of you are probably buying tea bags from the store. And it will generally say to let it steep for about 5 minutes before drinking. I generally recommend at least 15 minutes, 30 minutes to be better, and depending on the herb, doing a long steeped infusion. So anywhere from 4 hours to 8 hours or overnight. This really draws out a lot of the nutrients in the plant through this really long extraction, and it just makes the medicine that much more potent and beneficial for you. You could do a decoction. A decoction, again, is like a long simmer. So generally this is best done with roots. So ginger root, for instance. Sometimes I will throw a cup of ginger in a pot, cover it with water, bring it to a boil, and then let it simmer for a couple hours. And then some of the water is going to steam off as well, and you're gonna be left with a little bit more concentrated tea. I love to put this in a jar and refrigerate it and mix it with another warm glass of water. Depending on how strong that decoction is, I might do half warm water, half hot water, and half of the ginger brew. If it's a little bit weaker, then I'm going to use more ginger. I might just do a straight ginger cup as well. Burdock, astragalus. I will often do a decoction with these and use it as a soup stock. Oh, there's a little bug crawling on my couch here. Just drop him down there. And this can be a great way to get in herbal benefits into things that you're already consuming, eating. So I might make rice in a broth that I made with burdock. When you are making a cup of tea or doing an infusion, you can use fresh or dried plants. You generally have to use more substance when the plant is fresh and use less if it's dry. You will find dried plants offered at times in cut form or powder form. Either one is going to be fine. Generally, the more processed it is, like a powder is going to be another level of processing. Maybe the less potent it's going to be. When you're ordering herbs from kind of like the big box stores, like Frontier Herbs, for instance, you're a lot further away from the actual plant from the time that it was harvested. So with that time in between harvest and you using it, you're going to lose some of the medicinal benefits, but they're still going to be helpful and they're still going to work for you. If you can support somebody local, that's going to be your best bet, number one, because they are a smaller company, oftentimes a single person, and you are also just closer to the plant, so it's going to be fresher. It's going to be from the region that you're living in as well, which is going to generally be more medicinal for you. Let's see. There's different ways that you can use powders as well. I haven't experimented with these so much, but making like cough lozenges with slippery elm, which has a mucilaginous aspect to it, so kind of a sliminess, and it can be really soothing for a sore throat, mixing that up in some honey or maybe even maple syrup, but just kind of rolling that around and you have yourself a herb-coated honey ball. If you are cooking with herbs, a powder is probably going to be a better bet because you're not going to be chewing on like little bits and pieces of plant matter. Sometimes if all I have is powder option, then I'm going to, if I'm making a tea combination for myself or giving it to a client, I might just give them all powder because I have 2 powders here. The other one I have sifted and powdered. It's just gonna make it easier to make for them. Same thing goes with cut. I generally prefer to go with cut because you can put it in like a little tea ball and the powder doesn't escape through and you're not drinking up chalky stuff if it doesn't dissolve well. So that's a little bit about teas. One of my favorite infusions is stinging nettle, dried, and oat straw, and red raspberry leaf sometimes. Nettle is super nutrient dense, so you're getting lots of vitamins and minerals from this plant. Oat straw is a nice source of B vitamins, so I generally will throw that in there for myself and for lots of other people because stress depletes our B vitamins. It's also a nice source of calcium. Red raspberry leaf is a great source of iron and manganese, and it's a really nice herb for women in particular. It has an affinity for the reproductive system. So it's going to help to tighten and tone your uterus because it's an astringent herb. And it's going to be really nice for helping to support menstrual cycles and even pregnancy. This is a blend that I will often recommend to pregnant moms or those who are planning to get pregnant because it is such a powerhouse of nutrients that are necessary when growing a baby. And there are quite a few more too. So there's going to be other recommendations that come along with that. Sometimes the nettle is a little bit more on the drying side. Red raspberry leaf, it's tightening and toning. And oat straw, it's not as drying as the other two, so I think that helps to balance it a little bit. But if you're already on the dry side or you notice that it starts to dry you out, I might add another herb that has some more moistening properties. So something like marshmallow root could be really nice in this blend as well. So I will usually do a couple tablespoons of each, or a quarter cup to a half cup total of all of the herbs. And I throw it in a French press. I pour boiling water over it and I let it sit overnight. And if I'm using something like marshmallow root that needs the cold water to extract the really slimy mucilage beneficial parts, well, there's other parts that are beneficial outside the mucilage, but the cold water will extract that once the water cools down. So with that nice long overnight infusion, I'm getting all of those properties just in a single make without having to do it separately. Okay, so how about capsule and supplement? So this is a form of dried herb as well, but they are just shoved into a little gelatin capsule or vegetable capsule. These can be really, really helpful for many conditions, and it's a great option for those who need something a little bit easier. They might not be a tea person, and that's going to prohibit them from following a certain protocol to help with whatever it is that they are trying to bring back into balance. So capsules can be really helpful for a lot of people. Depending on, the quality that you're using, depending on, how long it's been in capsule form for, you're generally going to have to take probably a decent amount if you are working on repairing something. I use a brand called Nature's Sunshine most often, and they are a pretty good source in most cases of herbs. The general recommendation on the bottle is usually probably like take 1 to 2 to 3 capsules, but I always muscle test my clients to see what their body actually needs. And sometimes people might need like 2 capsules 3 times a day, so 6 capsules or 8 capsules. Tincture is another form. So this is generally the fresh plant, sometimes the dried plant, covered with alcohol. And it sits for 3 to 6 weeks or longer. And as it soaks in that alcohol and water, it extracts nutrients and minerals. This is my favorite way to take plant medicine because it's easiest for me, and I also get to taste the plant. Whereas with a supplement or capsule, I don't get to taste the plant. So that's another reason why I don't always go that route, because you are a little bit less connected with the plant there. When you get to taste something, you automatically have this new relationship with the plant that you are using. But again, sometimes capsules are just easier for some people. In some cases, that's what I end up taking because I am not great at remembering to brew up a cup of tea a couple times a day, or even do those overnight infusions. So it depends too. If I'm feeling like I've got a cold coming on, or if there's like something respiratory, tea is always my go-to. For me, that seems to work really, really well, better than a tincture in many cases for me. But I also have worked with enough people where tincture works really well for them with a cold. So there definitely is an individual aspect to that as well. What more can I say about tinctures? I love tinctures. I think they're so fun to make and to taste. And let's see, when it comes to dosing with tinctures, dosing knowledge is dosing advice, I'll say, is kind of all over the board. It's definitely a personal preference in some cases. So there's an herbalist, Matthew Wood, whom I really enjoy learning from through his books. And he does more what's called drop doses. So he will generally recommend 1 to 3 drops of many of the herbs that he's working with. A lot of people are going to use a lot more than that. If you go buy an herb farm tincture blend or single herb at your local health food store, oftentimes it's going to say take 10 drops 3 times a day or take 30 drops 3 times a day. So that's quite a disparity there, isn't it? From taking maybe 3 drops a day to 60 or 90 drops a day. Again, with my clients, I am muscle testing them to see what's going to be best for their body. And sometimes I get people where it is take 3 drops of this per day. And sometimes it's take 20 drops 3 times a day, so 60 drops. It also depends on the plant too. There are certain plants that are going to be much more potent or have specific effects, like lobelia, for instance. If you take too much of that, it might make you throw up. And if you don't need to be throwing up, that's not a very helpful or comfortable feeling. So when I work with lobelia, it is in a really, really low dose. Yes, that's what I've got for tincture. Okay. Another way to take in herbs is through what's called an oxymel. So this is a combination of vinegar and honey. So vinegar, I generally use apple cider vinegar, but older traditions will use wine turned vinegar. So when wine mixes with air, it forms vinegar. And this sour quality of the vinegar is medicinal. And it's also a preservative of the herbal properties. It draws out the herbal constituents, and it also helps to preserve these characteristics, similar to how an alcohol would. Vinegar-based herbal medicines don't last quite as long as alcohol preparations. Many herbs are going to last for years and years and years, if not forever, in an alcohol preparation. With a vinegar preparation, I have heard generally like around a year is going to be its lifespan. So you can do herbal vinegars, and then an oxymel would be also including the honey. So there's a sweetness to that, which can also be medicinal in and of itself as well. But it also helps to balance out the kind of rough taste and sour taste of the vinegar that you're using as well. I made a decoction of some herbs a couple weeks ago, and I let it cook down quite a bit. So I evaporated the water. I probably could have evaporated quite a bit more, but I got a little impatient or maybe forgetful. I don't remember. And then I blended those herbs with honey and vinegar to act as a preservative, because tea doesn't last very long. Depending on the herb, it might be good that day, or you might get, 2-3 days of shelf life from that if it's refrigerated. So because I essentially made a tea with it, I wanted it to last a bit longer. So I made this oxymel. I don't actually know if that is technically an oxymel, if I'm blending those two, or if like the herb has to be infused in the vinegar or the honey. Or maybe they both are and they're just different ways of preparing it. If you know, please let me know in the comments or send me a message. Another way that you can use plant medicine is just through a poultice. So a poultice is fresh plant. You can chew it up so it mixes with some of your saliva, it gets it a little bit wet, and you rub it right on your skin. And then depending on what you're using it for, you might want to cover it up to hold it in place. So a plantain poultice is really, really nice. If you get stung by a bee or bit by a bug, you might, if you're familiar with plantain, which grows all over the place, this is a pretty easy herb to find once you can identify it. Put that on the sting or the bite, and that's going to help draw out any of the toxins that were injected into you. It's going to help pull out any of the itch that might be associated with it. So it's going to help it heal faster. And it's going to help you feel better a little bit more quickly. I remember doing an herb walk with a group of people, and my son was with me, and a few other people brought their kids. So the kids were running around, and somebody got stung by a bee, and there was plantain right there. And so he chewed it up and he put it right on his bee sting and had relief like immediately. And as a 7 or 8-year-old kid, it usually hurts really bad. I mean, it hurts really bad when you're an adult too. So that's a poultice. You can use poultices for wounds. Plantain, again, is really nice with wounds because it helps to draw out any bacteria that might get in and cause infection in an open wound. And it also helps to heal the wound from the inside out. So it's a tropo-restorative herb. And it repairs at a cellular level. So that's a nice one to use for so many things. It's a drawing agent. It has repair mechanisms. Yarrow is another great herb. If you're bleeding, there are properties in the yarrow plant that help to stop blood. So it's important to let blood come out so that it can help move out any sort of bacteria that might be in that wound. But if you're profusely bleeding, you don't want to lose blood, and so you could use yarrow to stop that. Onions are another thing that you can use as a poultice. So chopping up some red onion and giving it a good squish, or pounding maybe to release some of the juices. You can put that in a cloth bag of some sort, and putting it right on your skin could burn because it is a pretty spicy vegetable, as you know. And for like chest congestion, respiratory congestion, put that poultice on your chest, and that can be a really potent herbal medicine. And so you're not necessarily consuming it or ingesting it, but you're letting its properties kind of draw and move the congestion from a topical poultice application. So food, getting herbal medicine in form of food is really a fantastic way to incorporate herbalism. When you think about your typical kitchen spices, these are all herbal medicines. So oregano, sage, thyme, cinnamon, all of these herbs are generally aromatic. And so when something is aromatic, it's going to be warming. It's going to have properties in it that help to kill off pathogens like viruses or bacterias. They can aid the body in immune defenses. So a fever is an immune system function. It raises the body temperature to help kill off a pathogen that may have gotten into the body. So these warming herbs can be really helpful to aid in fevers as well. And there are some specific herbs that are going to be more helpful in fevers than others, but we're not talking about specific herbs. Well, I'm trying not to. I know I just did with poultices right now, because that could, I could spend hours and hours doing that. Days, actually. But I just want to point out that these spices that we generally use in our food, making food, have medicinal effects as well. So if all that you have on hand are these kitchen herbs, you can make a tea out of these, or maybe you really kind of load it on because you know you want to get the medicinal properties of cinnamon or of rosemary, for instance. So you put a lot of that on your food throughout the day, or maybe you make a dressing out of that, and that is put on your salads or your rice bowls or grain bowls or something like that. It's a great way to get some medicinal properties in as well. Again, you want to use like a decent amount of these. If you think about a capsule, like those can be pretty small. There's a lot of herb crammed into them. But like I said, you might need, 6 or 8 capsules of something a day. So, getting in a tablespoon, 2 tablespoons of a particular herb can be really helpful. Garlic, that's one we could talk about. Garlic is such a great herbal medicine, and it's really, really yummy. It is most potent when it is in raw form, which can be sometimes the hardest form to eat it in. I know when I have a sore throat or I feel a cold coming on, oftentimes I'll just eat a clove of garlic, and it most of the time just wipes it out right away. It's a little spicy to eat that garlic clove, and I usually taste it when I wake up the next morning still. But it's such a potent herbal medicine that is also food. Let's see, glycerite, I mentioned that. Glycerites are herbal medicines made with glycerin. So glycerin is a really sweet substance. I never use these. I've never made a glycerite myself before. But this is a nice alternative for people who don't want to use alcohol-based remedies like a tincture. So that is also an option too. These are generally have a less, what's the word I'm looking for? They don't have as long of a lifespan as a tincture does. So that's part of why I don't use them either, just because, I make a lot of herbs with the plants that I'm familiar with that I encounter. I don't necessarily need them for myself at the time, but I like to have them on hand for clients. But I may not encounter a client who needs that herb that I made through a tincture process until a year from now. And a glycerite, might no longer be good enough to consume at that point. So that's why I typically go with tinctures. And it's such a tiny bit of alcohol that I don't see harm in it. Even for small little kids, I feel perfectly comfortable giving tinctures to children and babies. Let's see. Oil, that's one thing I didn't mention in the beginning. So herbal oils, herb-infused oils can be really, really lovely as well. usually for topical application, I don't do this often. Every once in a while, I will infuse an oil with herb. I think it works best to warm it a bit first. I always see things like use a double boiler to make this, and double broiler, I don't know. And I don't have one of those. I don't actually even know what it is. I should look up a picture of it because I actually think I have a setup that would allow me to do that. But that can be a really great way to get medicine in through the skin. Or if you're working on something on your skin, oftentimes there's going to be an internal component that you need to work with, but it can also just kind of speed it up when you are applying something topically as well, in many cases. So like I have this scar right here from a facial a few years ago, and I typically would use tamanu oil, which is an oil from a plant. It's not an herb infused oil. For scars, it's really great for scars, but it hasn't really worked for this one. So I actually just bought some bigger containers of oils that I typically use for oil cleansing my face, and I'm gonna infuse them with herbs. I haven't gotten around to that yet, but maybe after this I will actually get that started. I'm definitely a make it and forget about it type of person, more so than something that's labor intensive. So that's what I love about tinctures, is because you can just kind of forget about them and let them sit. Ideally, you'd be shaking them every day, but I don't. So anyways, back to oil. An herb infused oil would probably be really helpful to help me work out this skin issue right here. You can do like oil massages. Abhyanga is a self-oil massage philosophy based in Ayurveda. You can use that word if you want, or you can just call it an oil massage. And oftentimes in Ayurveda, they recommend using herbal infused oils. So you can buy those pre-made, or you can make them yourself as well. It's really hydrating for the body. And then based on whatever oils you're using, or whatever herbs you're using, you can choose those to target something more specifically. Let's see, what else? So that's a lot about a few different methods of interacting with herbal medicine. I talked about dosing for the most part. What else do I want to talk about? Is there anything more? Yeah, I can't think of anything off the top of my head right now. So let me know what questions you have, and I will do my best to answer them. And if you would like to donate something to this episode, please look for the links below, or find me on Venmo at kara-mcnabb, or PayPal me at kara-mcnabb@gmail.com. Thank you.